One of the many joys of science, to me anyway, is that in science nothing is ever settled. And this certainly applies to attempts to unravel the early history of Britain.
Good evidence-based research constantly refines our knowledge and assumptions. Sometimes it even overturns long-held beliefs, such as the concept of the Greeks in 400 BC that the Earth is the centre of the universe and the Sun revolves around it, which prevailed for 2,000 years until overturned by Copernicus and Galileo in the 16th century AD. In 1658, Archbishop James Ussher proclaimed that the Earth was created at exactly 1 a.m. on the 22nd of October 4004 BC, and thus today, in 2023, is only 6,027 years old. Some people still believe this.
Beware of theories that profess to be so precise. Nevertheless, Ussher's was an honourable attempt for its time, and it lasted 300 years until the rise of the science of geology in the mid-19th century. And this overturned the faulty assumption that the biblical account of the creation was literally true. The same rule of change applies to archaeology. New information and techniques are constantly adding to our knowledge and refining earlier concepts. Age dating is improving in precision and reliability, and who knows what new breakthroughs may be made in that area. For this reason, I will constantly be using about, around, or approximately, especially in reference to dates, as they are subject to change.
That said, current evidence suggests that the first hominids, that is, beings that resembled humans, originated in the forests of Central Africa, emerging about 7 million years ago onto the East African grasslands, where they remained for 5 million years until they evolved into Homo erectus, upright man, whose ability to walk facilitated more long-distance movement. Rather than merely scavenging like their ancestors, Homo erectus were the first hominids to mount deliberate and purposeful hunting using the stone tools they developed and sharpened wooden spears. Some 2 million years ago, the Earth began to emerge from one of its many periodic ice ages. The ice caps that covered much of the northern hemisphere slowly melted, and the continents became warm and damp. So the deserts literally bloomed, and the Sahara became a lush grassland populated by numerous herds of grazing animals, easy prey for the hominids. This allowed Homo erectus to range freely as far as they wished, for food was plentiful, and they began to migrate quickly in groups both north and south, and eventually explored the whole Earth. Their fossilized bones are found on every continent. They even made it as far as England and perhaps Scotland, for in 2013 archaeologists announced the astounding discovery of hominid footprints accompanied by more than 70 flint axe heads and tools at Happisburgh in East Anglia. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The estuarine sediments in which the footprints were preserved are 850,000 to 950,000 years old, overlain by younger 450,000-year-old glacial till and underlain by 1 million-year-old silts, using biostratigraphical and paleomagnetic dating of the rich assemblage of flora and fauna in the sediments.
That prior to this discovery, the oldest evidence of human occupation in Britain was dated at 450,000 years ago. Happisburgh once again demonstrates that science is never settled, as the discovery doubled the period in which humans may have roamed Britain.
The flint tools are human-made, with carefully crafted sharp edges that may have been used for skinning and butchering animals. The only known humanoid species of similar age in Europe is Homo antecessor, or pioneer man, whose fossil remains have been found at Grandolina Cave in Spain. The stature of the humanoids at Happisburgh, calculated from the footprints, matches that of Homo antecessor, who is sometimes equated with Homo heidelbergensis, a relative of the Neanderthals. We see here a reconstruction of what the Happisburgh encampment may have looked like 900,000 years ago. Evidence of other later temporary occupations of southeast Britain is found along the course of the former Bytham River Valley, which starts in Stratford-on-Avon and ends on the Norfolk coast at Pakefield. The occupation of these sites in East Anglia may have been in response to periods of global warming, which resulted in glacial retreat. When the ice returned during the Anglian glaciation, which started 478,000 years ago, the humanoid tribes retreated south, perhaps enjoying a sojourn in the south of France or along the coast of Spain, just as they do today. Meanwhile, the hominids who had remained in Central Africa evolved from about 400,000 to 200,000 years ago into the first beings that identify genetically as humans. We call them Homo sapiens because they had large brains and developed a fairly sophisticated Stone Age culture and implements. Around 130,000 years ago, the Earth entered the Ipswichian interglacial, an exceptionally warm period. During this interval of benign climate, Britain became cloaked in mixed deciduous forest, which eventually included an exceptionally large proportion of alder, in addition to birch, pine, oak, and holly. The tribes of Homo sapiens began to migrate from Africa just like their forebears. The former obstacle of the dry Sahara once again became lush and green, so they were able to move north following the River Nile. Reaching Europe over 40,000 years ago, they interacted, interbred, and displaced the former inhabitants, the Neanderthals, who probably had evolved from remnants of Homo erectus. The Neanderthals later became extinct during the last glacial maximum, probably because they did not have the technology to survive like Homo sapiens. Those early Europeans created a relatively sophisticated Paleolithic, that is, Old Stone Age culture, including jewellery, figurine sculptures in which fertility was a strong theme, musical instruments, and, very importantly, warm clothing. This is the sort of sound that a Stone Age flute can produce. The Paleolithic Europeans lived in caves, harnessed fire for cooking, and chipped tools, implements, and weapons out of stone, especially flint. They hunted to extinction the Ice Age large animals, such as the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed tiger, using the weapons that they had developed. One of the finest examples of the cultural flowering of Homo sapiens was found in a cave complex at Altamira, northern Spain, in 1879. The cave was first discovered in 1868 by Modesto Perez, a local hunter searching for his dog. But it wasn't until 1879 that the murals on the ceiling of the cave were spotted by the 9-year-old daughter of Don Marcelino Sanz de Saltola, the landowner and an amateur archaeologist. Saltola examined the cave further along with Juan Vilanova y Piera, an archaeologist from the University of Madrid, and the pair published a report in 1880 stating that the cave's wall paintings and engravings belong to the Paleolithic era of prehistory. All the experts ridiculed the suggestion and accused Saltola of criminally faking the paintings, which, him being a judge, so distressed him he died in 1888, shortly before the archaeological establishment reluctantly admitted that he was correct. Another fine example of settled science being very unsettled by new facts. Altamira is one of many such caves subsequently discovered along the mountains of northern Spain near the Atlantic coast on the main migratory route from the Middle East, which followed the North African coast, crossed the sea at Gibraltar, and led through Spain into France. The Altamira cave complex extends for nearly 300 metres and contains 3 main chambers. The one immediately behind the entrance is the main picture gallery, which has a low ceiling within easy reach of the artists, who drew about 100 pictures of animals, mostly bison, painted in a beautiful polychrome of red, black and violet. This bison with 8 legs may be an attempt to introduce a sense of movement into the painting. There are many other pictographs, some featuring horses, wild boars, and deer. The artists signed their work with handprints, which is a feature of many other caves, notably nearby at El Castillo. Surprisingly, the handprints at El Castillo seem predominantly to be those of females. Dating in 2012 using the uranium-thorium technique established the age of the oldest painting at Altamira as 35,600 years old. The interesting thing about the uranium-thorium dating method is that it gives a minimum age, so the artworks could be even older. Many of the sketches were done using charcoal, which enabled the use of radiocarbon dating as a cross-reference. The radiocarbon technique is reliable for dating material up to 60,000 years old. It was found that the artworks at Altamira ranged in age from 35,600 to as recently as 17,000 years ago, showing that Altamira was periodically occupied over a time span of nearly 20,000 years. In the decades after the discovery of Altamira, a plethora of Paleolithic caves, many with paintings, and all containing Stone Age artefacts, were discovered throughout Iberia and southern France. About the same time as the first artists were sketching at Altamira, across the Pyrenees Mountains in the Ardèche region of France, a similar group were hard at work in the limestone caves at Chauvet. Their paintings, thought to be 30,000 years old, were discovered by amateur speleologists in 1994. The magnificent artworks include images of lions, mammoths, bears, horses, and so on. Cave paintings, similar to those at Chauvet, occur also at Lascaux in the Dordogne region of southwest France. These are thought to be 20,000 years old. They were discovered by 4 young schoolboys in September 1940, just at the start of World War II. The boys told their teacher, who brought in an archaeologist, and within weeks the discovery was recognised as prehistoric and of national and international significance. Over 2,000 images of animals and humans have been identified. At the time the most recent artworks at Altamira were being painted, 17,000 years ago, sea level was nearly 100 metres lower than today, as the world was still in the grip of the last great ice age. Great Britain was part of the European continent, as the English Channel and adjacent North Sea were dry land, while most of Scotland lay under a thick layer of ice. The land bridge to Europe allowed early Europeans to migrate northwest into England and as far north as Scotland and the Orkney Islands. Whether they migrated westward from Denmark or northward from France or around the west coast from Spain really doesn't concern us here. We do know that the first groups of explorers set up their camps in the Orkneys 14,000 years ago, when low sea level meant the Orkney group was one large island, while the rest of Scotland was still covered by a glacial ice cap. These early visitors may not have stayed long, and their forays north were perhaps not frequent. They were hunters, living in small mobile communities and following herds of reindeer or the mammals such as seals along the coast. The preserved remains of an 11,000-year-old camp at Cremond near Edinburgh has yielded more than 3,000 artefacts, including about 300 stone tools and fragments. They were partial to roasted hazelnuts and left middens containing charred hazelnuts, which give definitive radiocarbon dates of 8,500 BC or 10,500 years ago, at the tail end of the last ice age. At that time, inland Scotland was still covered in glaciers and uninhabitable. Our attention now shifts to the flourishing heart of British civilization 10,000 years ago, the Orkney Islands.